the devotion that entered through the eyes. They arrived drenched in sweat, armed with cross, steel and a faith as flammable as their torches. They were men from the old world, strangers of a monochrome aesthetic and a faceless God. What first unsettled them wasn't the jungle or the strange tongues. It was the art. That art. If one could even call that art. Those bizarre forms, as if sprung from a collective nightmare. Distorted faces, hybrid bodies of man, jaguar and bird, sculptures with fangs, lolling tongues and bulging eyes, as though the entire indigenous world were possessed.
Bestiality,
cried Don Rodrigo, the group's leader, upon encountering a clay sculpture with 20 fingers and scaly breasts.
This isn't art. This is witchcraft.
They walked among stone temples covered in paintings depicting sacrifices, cosmic fertilizations, sacred wars, and gods with unpronounceable names. Everything struck them as a direct offense to Christian common sense.
How can they worship this?
They murmured between sighs of revulsion. Some crossed themselves upon seeing a deity with 3 eyes. Others vomited before a figure with jaguar teeth and male breasts. One even draped his cloak over a statue, not out of modesty, but pure disgust. There were codices with lines so intricate they resembled hallucinated nets. Murals in piercing colors. Impossible geometric figures and symbols everywhere.
Like children with too many pigments,
a soldier said, unable to distinguish cosmology from doodle. And yet, the indigenous people looked upon it all with solemnity. That statue of the god with a reptilian tongue and snail-shell eyes was not grotesque to them. It was sacred. Within it lived time, sky, and rain. But the newcomers saw no spirituality, only savagery. Don Rodrigo, his catechism rolled like a moral whip, declared,
"There is no soul in this. Only ugliness and superstition."
And he ordered it all to be burned. The destruction of the art was brutal. With hammers they smashed off stone noses, shattered zoomorphic bodies, and beheaded idols with the precision of someone pruning a garden. Everything had to burn. Everything had to be forgotten. But fate, that incorrigible jester, interrupted the holy crusade with a glimmer. It was Don Fernando who found it, buried in ruins and mud. A heavy, gleaming, and disturbingly familiar object. A mask of an indigenous deity. But not of clay or stone. Of gold, pure gold. He lifted it with trembling hands. It was of the same style as the sculptures they had just scorned. Gigantic eyes. Curved fangs. A long tongue. But now. Oh! What splendor, what perfection of line. What symmetry of savagery.
Dear God,
he whispered, not as a prayer, but as calculation. Around him, the others gathered. They touched it, turned it over, weighed it in their hands, as if trying to measure its worth. No longer did they speak of heresy, monstrosity, or impure idols. Now it was a work of great power, a unique expression of the divine, a testament to an ancient and refined civilization. The same shape, but in a different material. Gold was enough to change everything. The distorted faces no longer seemed ridiculous. They were enigmatic. The flaming tongues weren't obscene. They were symbolic. The bulging eyes became transcendent. Gold, like a varnish of legitimacy, had turned horror into beauty. And most unsettling of all, no Christian image seemed more beautiful to them than that indigenous mask. Don Fernando thought it, and said it aloud, unafraid of sacrilege.
Not even the Holy Christ of Seville has this power.
The phrase was uncomfortable, but went unchallenged. Don Rodrigo said nothing. Even he, the most dogmatic, seemed unable to sustain his scorn. For gold was a more effective evangelist than any papal bull. From that moment on, something changed in the expedition. The same men who days earlier had smashed idols to bits began collecting fragments. Any piece might be gold. Any sculpture, a potential mask. The artistic sensibilities of the entire troop improved. Suddenly, they spoke of style, of symbolism, of ethnographic interest. But let no one be fooled. There was no conversion. No true admiration. Only calculation. Don Fernando, in particular, became an expert. He no longer spat on the temple statues. He observed them carefully, studied their forms, imagined golden versions of each one. To him, they were all ugly, until they gleamed. He kept the mask tucked under his shirt, close to his chest like a relic. Not out of devotion, but greed. And something else. Power. That mask, more than any rosary, brought him closer to the heart of this new world. When they arrived at another village, again they saw grotesque forms, frantic paintings, clawed gods. But no one proposed destroying them. Don Fernando gave the order to preserve everything.
Who knows? There could be gold in some of these things,
he said, without irony. Respect had arrived. But it wasn't respect. It was interest. And though they spoke of valuing indigenous culture, what they truly valued was the metal. They would never have admired that mask had it been made of clay. It was ugly, they said at first. And it was. But once turned to gold, it became sublime. Even superior to their own. And that, though they'd never admit it openly, was an uncomfortable certainty that spread through the troop like a silent disease. Don Fernando never asked for forgiveness. He never wept before any altar. He never renounced his riches. But he no longer mocked the ugly idols. Not out of reverence, but because they were now possible treasure chests of gold. And that, in his language, was the closest thing to the sacred.